Welcome back to the CTV News, and now to our interview segment. In focus today, the question of empowerment and the role of civil society in governance. In an interview done for the reality show, Bernard Fannis speaks with community activist Darnley Lebourne about his early days mobilizing community, farmers and advocating for the environment. This is part one of that interview.
Okay, we want to welcome to our studios Mr. Darnley Lebourne. He's no stranger to the media and to St. Lucia. You've been involved in so many different roles in St. Lucia. And I was saying earlier on in some notes to you that we know you first came to my consciousness in the very early days in the farmers' movement and so on.
Yes,
so we'll talk about that and then the environment and so on. But then we want to welcome you to the reality show here on Calabash TV, as we want to start changing tones in terms of the discussion that we're having nationally. And so we think that we want to bring in some leaders to start discussing issues here with us. And one of the things that I probably want to start with, which is very current, and I know things change very quickly in 24 hours, is the developing situation in Zimbabwe. Did you ever imagine that in our lifetime that we would see start to see the making of the end of a Robert Mugabe era?
Yeah, and in some ways you want to describe Robert Mugabe as a sort of icon, straddling the early era of apartheid, and that experience of the African within their own homeland, experiencing racism from persons who were not of their own, if you want to say imperialist elements. And Mugabe certainly stood tall as somebody who resisted that sort of thing and provided leadership. But somehow he transformed, into, a dictator. I think we have to be frank about it, and became oppressor of his own people. Now, when you listen to Mugabe speak, he espouses some good ideals in terms of where he wants to see the African and Africa get to. But in practice, in terms of his process of governance, there's a lot to be desired. Of course, there have been numerous calls internationally that he, step down and allow for the country to breathe, so to speak, in terms of the democratic process. But we know power corrupts, and I think it's down to the individual. I shouldn't say power corrupts, but we are born with varying elements, negative and positive elements, and sometimes the negative aspects supersedes the positive, and I think that is what happens in many cases. I think I was picking up on the news this morning that apparently there was some effort to overthrow him. We have to see how that unfolds, and some people may welcome if it is successful. But what is sad is when you look at somebody like Mugabe, that these guys sometimes, behave in a way in which they demit office in a very sad manner. You would think that somebody like that would understand the need to, live in a very positive manner, sending a good message and sending hope out to the country and so on in terms of what he represents. So it has happened over and over where our leaders don't know when to step back. And I think that is clearly the case with Robert Mugabe.
Is it something to do with even the word power? Because people say they're in power, and that gets to them. It's not like I'm serving the country.
Right.
If it was we get in the service of the country.
Yes.
Is it that the fact that they have that kind of power, influence over other people, that lets them to think that I want to hold on to this for as long as possible?
Yeah, it's interesting you use the two words almost simultaneously, power and service, because I think that's the two notions that's at play here. For me, power is a notion that one is in control, that you have to exercise authority based on how you see things. Service for me is a different orientation. It's about understanding first that you're dealing with people. And let's face it, Bernard, governance is about people. You know, politics is about people. And I think the quicker our leaders get to learn that, it's going to serve them in good stead. So service is about people in the first instance. It's about listening. It's about following. You can't be a leader if you cannot follow, you know. And it's about engineering actions and changes that relate to consensus or consensual view. So in many cases, a leader becomes a facilitator, right? And it's something I think many people don't grasp. There's a difference between a chairman of a meeting and a facilitator. And it's almost throwing up the same two notions of power versus service, you know. So I think these are fundamentals that people need to wrap their heads around and understand. And many of the problems we face in our development process and government is those simple understandings, those simple notions that people don't grasp, that you're elected by people, they have invested. And I use that word invested because our people, I think, are stretched out in terms of their hope for meaningful change. So almost every other election, people say, well, Jay, now try a call. You know, that kind of thing, to see if there is meaningful change. And I think over the years, our people have been disappointed, unfortunately so, because we have not met leaders who understand themselves as service-oriented and as facilitators. You know, I listen to the people. What is it they want to create out of the space? It's not about me, you know. Now, I say that and juxtapose that against a reality check. There are times as a leader, you must make decisions. You must analyze things because people perhaps may be influenced in the wrong manner. They may not understand certain realities, be they global realities and so on. And so, but even that, the way it is done, it must be done in a way in which things are explained and rationalized and not just imposed.
Because we're seeing a very interesting situation in England. Even today, the Parliament is discussing Brexit.
Yeah.
And it's a fine mess that they found themselves in. Now, again, people decided. So what do you do? What do you decide as a prime minister? This is what the people want, and you have to fulfill the mandate as to how you approach it, whether it's going to get a country deeper into a hole, or whether it could be a brand new dawn for the United Kingdom and so on. So in terms of that, as you mentioned, as we were talking about the two words, power and service and so on,
right.
I was wondering if we need a revision completely of our terminology, because even opposition, when you say there's the leader of the opposition, that seems to suggest that's what he's there for.
Yes.
Is it time that we have a change in the terminology?
Well, that is something we could look at, but as I suggested earlier, it's really about the individual. It's really about how, I mean, for instance, in the past we have heard, for instance, our police makeup should be referred to as the police service and not the police force, you know, that sort of thing. But you know what, Bernard, I think a lot of changes have to be engineered by the electorate, by the citizenry. We have to make certain demands. We need to see the formation of more civil society organizations that can fill the void between government and the people. And in St. Lucia, it's really pronounced, you know. It's my view, though, that a lot of what stands as civil society in St. Lucia is not genuine civil society. They're individuals who are domineering factors, and there are questions about the democratic process within these entities, you know, in terms of how people receive their mandates. And there are a lot of shady things in terms of people's networking and connections to their benefit and so on. It's really not about grassroots, you know, something that you merge.
But how do we get that going? Because it's easy for somebody to hijack an organization. They can form an organization for their own ends and so on. And instead, it's very quick for somebody to say, "Oh, this person is being political," as if being political is something that you know that you demonize and so on.
Right.
But how do we build that? Because I've heard quite a bit about the civil society and so on. How do you build civil society? And we must expect that some members will be political. If you support a political party, you have a particular view. But how do we deal with it? Do we have the maturity enough for us to be able to handle that?
This is the CTV News. The reality show interview will continue shortly.